Namaste Bharat and welcome to special interview on Nation First English with me Prerna Tirvaipati. Today let us try and understand what exactly happened in the 1990s in Kashmir. Try and get an insider's point of view on the horrendous exodus and hear from a Kashmiri Pandit himself of what they had undergone as a community and the refusal of the Indian government back then to declare this as a genocide. And also let us try and understand the difference that has happened in the life of Kashmiri Pandits across India and the world after the abrogation of Article 370 and what the current Modi government is able to offer to all the Kashmiri Pandits. Today, I have with us a very special guest, Mr. I.K. Pandit, who is a Kashmiri Pandit himself. Namaste Panditji, thank you so much for joining us today. If you could please give a brief introduction about yourself to our audience, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is I.K. Pandit, which stands for Iqbal Krishna Pandit. I am basically a Kashmiri Pandit. I belong to a village called Krungsu in district Anantnag, which is on the south of Kashmir. I am born and brought up in Kashmir. My father was working with J&K police. I had my all studies. I think my first job was also in Kashmir. And post that in 1990, as all of you know, very unfortunate exodus take place and all of us Kashmiri Pandits had to flee from Kashmir. And then I started in search of job across various cities of India. First for a few months I was in Jammu with my parents. Then I moved to Ahmedabad. I started working there with Asian Paints. From there I moved to Hyderabad. Last 20 years I am in Hyderabad. I have got 2 kids. We are right now staying in Gachibowli, Hyderabad. So that's me in front of you.
Thank you so much. And Panditji, I had written down a series of questions that I wanted to ask you. But before the interview when we spoke, I came to understand that there are a lot of memories that you still have from there. And you were 24 years
25,
old,
yeah.
25 at that time. So
yeah.
Everything is still very clear for you. And when you recollected all those horrific memories, my first question that popped up in my mind was this the case? So this happened in the 90s with you. Was this the case even pre-independence in Kashmir? Like, has anything been chronicled? Because you were telling me that this has been happening since the last 900 odd years or more.
So, first of all, let me tell you, those painful memories are always fresh in our minds. I think what made me to come here so running and so fast is I also think we need
Thank
to
you.
give back to our society. If people across globe didn't know what has happened with Kashmiri Pandits, I am also to blame for that, because unless we reach to every nook and corner of the globe, I think our voice will not be heard. So under that context, I think I respected your call and I came here.
Thank you so much for accepting my invite.
Uh, Prerna, the problem with Kashmir has been we are the originators of Mother Kashmir. We call it as motherland, homeland, and we have been deprived of our motherland. For me, it happened in 1990. There were about 350,000 people who migrated along with me at that point of time. But very honestly, it has started much earlier. The genesis is Kashmir was the basic land of Kashmiri Pandits, so-called Brahmins. In Kashmir, all Kashmiri Pandits are Brahmins. And when non-Hindu rulers came to Kashmir and started ruling, slowly, a lot of suppression took place. There were divide of opportunities. There were divide of jobs. In 1900, the land of Kashmiri Pandits was taken away and given to the Muslims over there. This was the seventh exodus which took place in 1990. So this, what you call is that this cruelty, this intolerable pain has been with us for so many generations. A lot of people have started fleeing from Kashmir from 1900 onwards, and there were 2-3 main reasons for that. Number one, you are a Hindu, most of others are Muslims, so you are not able to speak your mind, you are not able to speak freely, you are not able to exercise your religion freely. As we put tilak over here, if you are seen with a tilak, there is a fear which gets mounted inside that I am a Hindu, rest of people are Muslim, so what will happen to me? In a bus, there are about 30-40 people and 1 or 2 guys are Kashmiri Hindus, so you can understand what pain he will understand, what fear psychosis is he will undergo, and this has been happening. So one is that there has been inherent fear because we are Hindus. Number two, when Muslims became the rulers, opportunities to us were deprived. People were not getting jobs. People were not being provided jobs on merit. So one good thing about Kashmiri Pandits is they are very literate. From day one till now, our first thing is give education to your child. In fact, among many other communities in India, Kashmiri Pandits are 100% literate even today. So when we were having that education and we were on the top of the merit, we were deprived of those jobs, what we used to deserve. So many people at that point of time had migrated to many parts of globe, maybe US, Delhi, Jaipur, Hyderabad, Kolkata, a lot of other places. That has been happening. So, and this was the seventh exodus which happened in 1990. My memories, let me tell you, I passed my 10 plus 2 plus 3. I was in the 10 plus 2 plus 2. This thing, I was one more year to go to complete my graduation. And it was 1986. I was studying with a friend of mine in a nearby village. And what happened, I was there for about 10 days. It was very severe winter. I think February or so, month of February 1986. What happened is, in district Anantnag, most of the temples were burnt. That is considered as the starting point of this migration, this movement, which made us to flee away from Kashmir. You get up and in the morning and see everywhere Kashmiri Pandits' temples were burnt. And then there was this curfew. I was about 20 kilometers away from my village when I heard at my place my mother and sister were only at that point of time. So I left that place. Kashmiri Hindus wear farran. Farran is a traditional dress of Kashmiris, both Muslims and Hindus. Hindus have a typical extra cloth so that it can be taken out and you can use it. If you are shorter, you put it like this. That's called as lad in typical Kashmiri. I had to take out of that lad. I had to take out my janoi
Okay.
and put it in my pocket and traveled all that distance to my village. The only thing which was going in my head is I'm a Kashmiri Pandit, young, I think 23 years old boy who is going all along this. If people along the sides will see me, they should not be able to differentiate that I am a Hindu. In that environment, I have been grown up. My uncle was going on a tonga. Tonga is a horse cart,
Horse-driven horse.
driven this thing. So there was a big possession in 1989 in Anand district, Anantnag, Maine. And you imagine there are 6 people sitting, 3 front, 3 went on that tonga. This Muslim tonga wala, he told this uncle of mine, Pandit ji, aap utar jao. Pandit ji, come down. And that was it. Everyone got to know. They pounced on him. They beaten him. And he had multiple fractures. All these stories we had, I had been grown up hearing this. My mother will not have her bindi on her forehead because she will fear that if somebody will get to know and I am all alone, anything is possible. So I have personally been grown in an environment wherein there was fear. There was this trauma going inside all of us that we are sort of second-class citizens. We can't go and worship very loudly. Few days back was Diwali. My daughter was telling me, Daddy, आप वो शंख बजाते हो. And a lot of our neighbors come and told me, Pandit ji, आपकी morning की पूजा बहुत अच्छी होती है. And I told her, I have left that place only because I couldn't perform this puja or my father couldn't do it. Because that fear was prevailing all across. So I was grown up in that environment, and 86 this happened. So the environment across Kashmir became very, very turbulent, very volatile. And even at that point of time, many people left Kashmir because they were able to see that things are boiling up. There are people who are coming from across the border, exploiting some so-called good Muslims also in the name of religion, and trying to create that environment wherein they felt that they will attain freedom in few months or in few weeks. That was the environment at that point of time. Basically, when I talk about Muslims over there, the fundamental thought was either we become part of Pakistan, or some of them thought that, which is that JKLF, we should be an independent nation.
Okay. So freedom, when you say they were looking for freedom, they want freedom from India basically.
They don't want to be with India.
Okay.
But the problem is we are the original inhabitants of Mother Kashmir. And nobody is even hearing us, is paying attention to our voice. If you see today also, most of the surnames of Kashmiri Muslims is same. There are Pandits who are Muslims, but the surname is same. Bhatt is a very prominent Kashmiri Pandit. Bhatts are Muslims. Most of them have common surname.
Even today.
Even today also. Now that's how what has happened is post, so 86 this happened, temples were burnt, then there were repercussions. We tried to reach out to the government, something here and there happened. Then the movement was brewing. There were a lot of terrorism. There was a lot of people. They were gathering in the mosques, and the slogan was one: हम क्या चाहते, आज़ादी. यहाँ क्या चलेगा, निज़ाम मुस्तफ़ा.
Nizam-e Mustafa.
Yeah, निज़ाम मुस्तफ़ा means अल्लाह का ये. Now imagine we Kashmiri Pandits are spread all across Kashmir because we are original inhabitants.
Ji.
In my village, there are about 150 Muslim families, and we were 12 families when we left. 12.
12 versus 150.
150. Now many people tell us why you have left and all. You imagine one point of time when the possession came from Anantnag to our village, we had what can we do? Even if all of us will assemble,
All 12 families.
12 into 4, 12 into 5, 12 into 6,
Ji.
70 people, 80 people, 100 versus 1000 or 5000 is the equation. We can't do anything. And basically, Kashmiri Pandit is true Indian, is a non-violent human being, is very literate human being. So we never chose violence. We always thought non-violence is the way wherein we will be able to reach out to the rest of the world. But I'm very sorry what happened in 90. Nobody, even we have this grudge that Indians, they couldn't hear our voice and came out in big numbers
To support.
and display that solidarity with all of us.
Yes.
That yes, something great has happened. We call it as genocide.
Ji.
Government of India, when they want to play with it, they call it as genocide, but they don't recognize it as genocide. So we always believe that major wrong has happened with all of us. We are called Kashmiri migrants. We belong to Kashmir and we are called as Kashmiri migrants. That is the plight. My son tells me, Daddy, I want to go to my native place. A lot of my friends, somebody is from Bihar, UP, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu. On Diwali, our main festival is Shivratri. So we are actual Shaivites. We couldn't go there. From last 30 years, we are not able to go back to Kashmir. So this is the environment in which I was grown up. So what happened in 90, I will narrate you my story, how I left.
Ji.
Because there are a lot of narratives which are saying Kashmiri Pandits have left on their own, Jagmohan has helped them. My father was in J&K police. He was the sub-inspector. So in CID, wherever there were bomb blasts, he had to go there and he had to investigate the matter. His name was put on the hit list. I had 2 brothers. I had 1 sister. So when we saw things going wrong, a lot of people came to us and told your father is on the hit list. For 2.5 months, we had sort of prisoned him in our own house, in the one room, and he was ready to go, sort of things. If you get those days, a lot of Kashmiri J&K police people who are Kashmiri Hindus were killed. So since my father was an investigating officer, so many people gave us those indications that he is also on the list. So we had sort of put him in that room. Any point of time you get a knocking from anybody, he will flee from there. And what happened, I think 19th January 1990, we call it as Black Day from Kashmiri Pandits' point of view. All across Kashmir, in mosques, there were these slogans, Hum kya chahte, Azadi. Batav Rusti Batnev San means without male Kashmiri Pandits and with female Kashmiri Pandits. We want them.
So you leave your women behind.
here and then flee away from this.
Get out
In
of
fact,
Kashmir.
that point of time, they gave this slogan, Relive. Relive means either get converted, Salive, flee, or Galive, or get shot or get killed. Relive, Salive, Galive. This was the
Three
sort
options.
of three options given to us, and definitely we thought this is our motherland, this is our India, so we sort of chose this option of fleeing away in order to respect ourselves, our dignity, and we thought definitely at some point of time we'll be able to make our voice heard to the larger audience, and I'm sure things are moving up. We will be
Indians
will understand the correct narrative of what has happened with us. So I was telling you, 19 January this happened. So then people started fleeing. It was terror in the evening. I was in Srinagar at that point of time. Across Kashmir, people gathered in masks, giving these slogans, and then trying to get Kashmiri Pandits in those positions. If I am part of a position wherein it is they are saying, यहाँ क्या चलेगा निज़ाम मुस्तफ़ा, I don't think I will probably get killed rather than that's how many rather than be part of that slogan mongering mob. So then they had the only option. They left early morning, whatever, through from January, February, March, April, May. This continued in a major till May. We left in April, 22nd April. I left with my father, with my pregnant baby and a small, she was 3.5 years old niece. My father, he portrayed as if he is going on to the main road. He had a towel on his head, wearing a Kashmiri ferran. Early morning, around 6:37, he left his home, reached the national highway. We took a bus, me, my father, my pregnant baby and niece, and reached Jammu. Honestly, Prerna, I didn't know what to do. When I came out of bus, I had 2 bags, some clothes, some biscuits. We looked around, said, we had nobody. Where do we go? And honestly, between Jammu and Kashmir, Kashmir is really paradise. What you see in Switzerland today is actually in Kashmir. The temperatures are very moderate. Here the temperatures are very high. It goes even up to 48, 50. So I said, where do we go? You know, I had a friend who had come few days back, and I heard that he is staying in a tent. There is a place called a Jaddi Kanachak in Jammu. I took a bus from there with my father. He said, "Aap yahan kahan mujhe lekar aaye?" Imagine we had a big house there. My father made an L-shaped house. We are 3 brothers. He said, "I had an old house. I want to make a big house for you, L-shaped, 2 apartments on this side, 1 on this side, and a big hall, because we had a big family. Sometimes marriage and all those social gatherings to happen." He said, why you have got me here? We reached a tent. I started searching for my friend, and I found we had 2-3 nights in that tent initially. Then I went next day. I also got a tent in my name. And I was staying there for about 15-20 days myself. My baby, she delivered a boy baby during that time only. Then we hired a small room, and then the life moved on. I'm saying those were the considerations, those were the prevailing situations at that point of time. And people are telling us that Jagmohan had come and he wanted you to come out of this. My mother was there because my other brother was there. My mother couldn't leave because we don't want to shut the house. We want to tell people, no, we are still living in that house. That was the fear. We don't want to tell anyone that we are leaving. Then one day my brother came. I have another brother. He came in a taxi, took my mother, and then they came after few days. So that is how we have left our homeland. And then I started sort of in my earning, in my livelihood, I started wandering throughout India. I first went to Ahmedabad in search of job. I was working then I got a job in Asian Paints. I worked in Ankleshwar. Ankleshwar is a place which is between Baroda and Surat. Then in 2001, I was transferred in Asian Paints to Hyderabad, and from 2001 I am here in Hyderabad. So this is the trauma. This is the pain I still have. My father died because only of this thing. He had lived his life very honest officer, and he came to Jammu. He didn't find people who can talk to him in Kashmiri. He didn't find people wherein he lost his all that stature. He lost all his acquaintances, and he has to sort of one point of time stand in a queue and say, "Can you give me 1 liter of kerosene oil so that I will lit my stove and make the food?" So that is how it happened with all of us.
Thank you so much for sharing this with me, and I'm so sorry to bring back all those bad memories and making you speak, but as listening to your story, I'm sure even our audience is able to understand that sort of pain that every Kashmiri Pandit has been through, and still it's your lived experience and you're feeling that pain even today. Pardon me for
No, before
asking.
you ask me another question, my one thing which is a grudge in all of us, all Kashmiri Pandits, is when we left Kashmir, we were always hoping that rest of India will come and stand with us. I think that didn't happen. So, which I mentioned in my initial remark also. My appeal through your channel, through your medium, is that let this reality reach out to the masses, and then they support looking at the facts. And then this momentum gets built up, this real narrative comes out, what has happened with the Kashmiri Pandits. And then the government should consider making this exodus a genocide.
They should declare it.
They should declare
They
it
should
a
declare it a
genocide, which has
genocide.
been deprived. And very honestly, today when I go back as a tourist. And I don't go back as a Kashmiri Pandit today who has to settle there, stay there. Why I cannot stay there? I have another 3-4 years of my service. It was always in my mind I will go and settle there. Why I cannot do that? But you can see over last few months the situations again is deteriorating.
Yeah.
So somewhere the government of India also has to come forward and understand the situation in a manner wherein they have to sort of declare this as genocide and take all those steps which will ensure safety, security of Kashmiri Pandits, and we return and get sort of accommodated, live there with dignity. People today, government says that you go there. People are going because they are compelled, because somebody may not have a job, somebody may not have 5,000 bucks to live. That is the situation people are living, and government probably is exploiting that. But the responsibility of the government is to take us back, ensure our safety, ensure our security, and let's go back with dignity back to our motherland.
Thank you so much for that, Panditji. My question to you is, the people who were the perpetrators of this, or who were the aggressors in this case, who caused this exodus in the 90s, were they Kashmiri Pandits who had converted to Islam, or were they Islamic or Pakistani people who came into Kashmir? I'm sorry, this is just for the audience who are not aware.
My perspective is like this. You take any Muslim even in today in Kashmir, they are basically, as I told you, they are Kashmiri Pandits.
Ji. They used to be
used
Pandit
to be at some point of time, and eventually some of their ancestors got converted and today became. This is one part of it.
Ji.
So today, by religion, they are Muslims. There is a lobby which is either probably propagated in Pakistan in the name of religion.
Ji.
They exploit most of Muslims in Kashmir.
Okay.
my neighbor, everybody's neighbor, and it is very possible that 20, 30, 40% of them get exploited and believe that we have a common religion, which is Islam, and why we cannot do all that what is being told us by so-called these people from Pakistan, in fact
Kashmir, the separatists.
the separatists, and they have been exploited to the extent that a lot of money has been given to them. I know so many people who were not able to make up their livelihood have been given a lot of money and they got converted into terrorists. This is one part of it. This is one part of it. But what is again our grudge is, in Kashmir, the terrorism, the militancy, or this so-called the anti-Indian thing will not happen unless there is a softer sympathy from all of us, including my
As
neighbor,
Indians.
all Muslims. So there is a terrorist who has come to a village. If everyone is going to boycott that terrorist, he will come on the roads and everybody will know. But there are people who give them hiding, and government or security people are not able to identify them. So to my mind, while a lot of people say there was a lot of pressure on us, the way Kashmiri Pandits were also killed, Kashmiri Muslims were also, but I'm saying you cannot make a moment as strong as it had been late in 90s unless everyone supported in one way or other, which made us to feel that my neighbor is not with me now. Otherwise, you see every killing, the correct address, the moment the person who had sort of given those correct details has been the neighbor. In some way, they have sympathy with this moment. Yes, they also have pressure from terrorists, but if you have to choose with the right, you should stand up and say something is wrong. He has been my neighbor. I can't give you his address or his details. But that has not happened. A lot of people have been killed even by neighbors only. So this narrative that in general Kashmiri Muslims have not been with this movement, I'm saying they have always been part of this movement.
Yeah, how else will you explain?
Otherwise,
Targeting killings.
Abhi recent killing of Mr. Bhushan Lal Bindru.
Yes.
He
The
was
pharmacist.
there, a pharmacist. People are saying that many a times people have come to him, asked for medicine. Suppose the medicine costs 100 and this guy has only 80. He has given him medicine, him or her medicine. Later on, take the medicine and give me later on money.
Right.
That fellow was today killed on a gunshot is something which is unacceptable. How can one think of who is in service of those all the neighbors?
The whole community, the whole...
It couldn't happen without the support
support.
Insider information. So I thought I have clarified this with this.
Yes, and that also aptly explains the book of Dr. Rajat Mitraji's title of his book, The Infidel Next Door.
Very true.
Ji. Another thing I wanted to ask you, sir, is how was the Indian Army, what was our Indian Army doing during the 90s exodus? Were they supportive? Did they help? The government, as you mentioned earlier, wasn't of much help. What about our Indian Army?
I think Indian Army did what government told them to do. So they went by the directives of government of India. So that is, I think, what has happened. But I'm saying Indian Army is always portrayed in a very bad light.
Yes.
But honestly, if you see Indian Army, to my experiences, have always displayed humanity. I don't think they discriminate between a Hindu and a Muslim. if there is a guy who is anti-national, I think their job is to catch hold of him, dead or alive. So that's what they have been doing. And the only difficulty with them is we have people who have come from all across India. So they many a times feel difficulty in locating the geographies, the people, the all that. I think those are difficulties they find, and the language is the biggest barrier. The temperature there is in extremes. You have snowfall, minus temperature in winter. So those are some challenges they face. Otherwise, I think that point of time they did what the government asked them to do. So
Sir, would you say that the government was hand in glove with this? Are they equally to blame along with the citizens
we
of India who
always
didn't
blame the
stand?
government of India more than anybody else. Rubia Said was kidnapped and terrorists were left
Released.
free, which was a blunder at that point of time. Number one. Number two, Mufti Muhammad Said, the Home Minister of India at that point of time, was responsible. A Home Minister is always responsible for all these things. And more importantly, when this thing was happening, the government should come into action, take those steps, and ensure that people don't come out, go or flee from their homes.
They don't have to flee. It is the responsibility of the
Ability
government.
of the government, but they were not able to do that. In fact, the government was sort of helpless at what is to be done. It was only after some time they started looking at how the situation can be improved. Late in 90s, 96, 97 onwards, but 1990 they were all helpless. They couldn't sort of take control of the situation and ensure that generate that confidence in Kashmiri Pandits, so that we were not forced to flee. That didn't happen. So we always blame government of India for that.
And just for our international audience, a small reminder, Mufti Muhammad Kashmiri himself was the Home Minister during the 90s.
That's
Exodus.
89, yeah.
Yeah, and he was very familiar with the geographical location, the language. Nothing was a barrier for him. Unknown to him. He was the Home Minister at that point, and he failed. So
miserably.
did the government. Ji. And one more thing, so all these palatial homes that you had over there, all the property, the orchards, the fruit orchards and everything. So you had to leave everything. And
I mentioned to you, we had a 3 L-shaped house, which my father said we will make it for 3 of you. I think
brothers,
everything we had to left it in as it is condition. But what happened is, because many of people, as you have to live your life for the survival, many of people had sold those properties in distress. Many people had encroached the properties and sort of taken away those properties. It is off late, I think about 6 months back only, after Kashmir, J&K became a union territory.
After abrogation of 370.
After abrogation of 370. I think governor of J&K Union Territory, they had passed a law saying that any property post 90, if it has been sold and the seller, which is Kashmiri Pandits, if they feel that it has been sold in distress, they can sort of register their complaint and government will look into it. So that is a few months back it has happened. But honestly, the situation on the ground, people have taken the property if it has been sold in peanuts. Number one, because distress sale. 30 years is a big time period. So number one. Number two, many places the localites have encroached the property and built big buildings over there. You can imagine many of us who had their livelihood only on their business, small businesses, small orchards, they had to leave. The plight of all those You can even see now there are camps in Jagati, Jammu.
Yes.
Is not even now they are not living I'm not saying a very good life. I'm saying basic sanitation things are missing there. So even as late as 2021, government is not able to understand the pain, the trauma which a Kashmiri Pandit has undergone, and that is always our problem. We have not been able to reach to the masses so that this gets converted into a movement and people hear us.
Because as an organization, Hindu Jan Shakti, we deal with a lot of conversions, and we see the minute they convert from a religion like Hinduism to Islam, there's suddenly a radical change in their thinking, their psychology, their behavior, and everything. So, as you had mentioned, and as we see even today, there's such learned people within the Kashmiri Pandit community. There's Sunanda Vashishti, there is Sushil Panditi. There's numerous people, and all of them have undergone this sort of trauma. And then we have this media that says that a Muslim boy was beaten, ek thappad ya ek lapi mare the army, and then that boy became a radical Islamic terrorist. So despite undergoing this sort of trauma, how come the Kashmiri Pandits have still remained, academically, superior to most or the rest of the Kashmiri?
So my take is very different. My take is, as I mentioned to you, Kashmiri Pandits are Brahmins. We are Shaivites, basically. Our understanding is the more you learn, the more knowledge you have, the better it is. You will be able to give back to society, you will be able to live a better life. I think that is what is driving us for our literacy and all that, number one. Number two, we always thought that it is the path we should choose is non-violence. There are people who are young in their age, younger generations, they always talk to us and talk why we cannot पत्थर का जवाब पत्थर से क्यों नहीं दे सकते हैं. But I think the larger sense prevails that violence is not a weapon which has to be chosen for our community to reach our voice to the masses, is part one of your question. Violence can always be prevailed by anyone, but it is good that if you choose non-violence, are able to make your voice heard across the nations and across the globe. This is part A. Part B is, I also heard many a times that some army person has done something, killed somebody. If you see, Indian Army has displayed a very human face, even under those tough. For them also, it is equally disturbing. You have all across people who are throwing stones on them, and you expect them not to retaliate. At least they are also humans. But despite of those conditions, they have displayed human face. I am saying human deliberately. They have not discriminated when a terrorist is based on their religion. And unfortunately, most of or all of the terrorists are those guys
Muslim.
only. Are those
They are
guys
Muslim.
only. So they are in their job and they are for the nation. I think in that respect, they are displaying their nationalism through their job very, very rightly. Part one. Part two, under those circumstances, as I mentioned, there is a lockdown. There are 4 terrorists staying inside a house, and the entire village is coming out and chanting those slogans in favor of those 4 terrorists. And there are those army people who are sort of in the between the death and life, there is hardly one sort of breath is there. My view is under those circumstances also they have maintained a very calm composure, and it could be one of wherein his emotion has he is about to die
Yeah.
and somebody is
No
coming.
civilian deaths.
So otherwise they have maintained the composure and did what is expected out of an Indian army personnel. So my salute to them. I think people are portraying those
Yeah, especially the
wrong
Bollywood.
narratives and all that. I don't think that that is. He is there on the street to take care of Indian territory, Indian national, and if somebody is displaying an anti-national, whatever it may
a
be,
threat. Yeah.
he is displaying an Pakistani flag. What do you expect him to do? Will he go and garland him, or he has only two options? He can kill him. Despite of that, he gives him an option. By take out this flag, go to your house, don't take this path. If he does repeatedly and even then people are not listening, I think they have to face the brunt. But Indian army is doing exceedingly well, displaying their job, whatever they are expected.
Thank you so much for clearing that
Thank you
for
very
our audience, sir. Because, like you said, the army has always been portrayed in bad light, especially by the media as well as the films and Bollywood, particularly. Before I let you go, sir, I just wanted to know what. So, what are your expectations now from this Modi government? So, they've abrogated Article 370. You said that you want to live there with dignity and with in safety and with self-respect and everything in Kashmir. But how would you say that maybe us as Indians, as fellow Indians, or to our audience, what would be your message? How can we help? How can the Modi government help Kashmiris? What would be your suggestions?
I think now in today's environment, Kashmiri Pandits have clearly put down their sort of demands and put it to the government of India. Number first is genocide.
Declare
Denial
it.
of genocide has to be taken
Stopped,
back,
yeah.
has to be stopped. Number one. Number two, still the justice with all those people who have been killed is still pending. A lot of people. There are people who killed Kashmiri Pandits and they are open on the Kashmiri streets. I think justice with those is still missing. Third, on a broader sense, as I meant to you, as I told you, is I am a Kashmiri Pandit.
Ji.
I always feel pride. I am a Kashmiri Pandit, honestly. I wanted to go back at my own terms. This is my land. Whenever I wish, I should go there. I should be able to stay there. Nobody should be able to stop me. I should not have that fear. So government has to make the environment conducive so that I am able to go back with dignity. This is sort of expectation. In terms of making it practical, I think we have an organization called as Panun Kashmir. They have come up with this idea. As I mentioned to you, across nook and corner of Kashmir geography, Kashmiri Pandits live in every village of Kashmir. Many think that we can go back and stay in our own ancestral places. I think under today's circumstances, it may not be possible. But our expectation is we go back with dignity and live where we want. One of the thought idea which emerges is within Kashmir, you demarcate a huge piece of land for Kashmiri Pandits, and that then the safety becomes easy to manage, security becomes easy to manage, and all of us who want to come back will stay there, live there
In that
designated area. One designated area, bigger portion. There can be many combinations. That can be again called a union territory, or that can be part of this thing. However, they can manage it, and within that we can. I have a, as I told you, I am from village Krungsu. I can always go to my place, do whatever, purchase a land there, have some business over there, have the affiliation with my ancestral land. I think that's a workable solution which people have come up with. So these are some of the expectations from us, and these are some of the demands which we expect from Government of India.
And the last bit of my question, sir, was as fellow Indians and citizens of the world, what can we do? Like over here at Nation First English, we're trying to get your voice out to reach as many people as we can to spread this awareness. But as fellow Indians, what can we do?
My answer is very different.
Ji.
I think Kashmiris, one of issues with us is that we were the only people who could talk about India when we were in Kashmir, where we were labeled as Indians and we were proud to be labeled as Indians. I have no hesitation in saying that. Now that we are out of India, and for last 30 years, this whatever has happened with us from the beginning to 90 has been unknown. Different narratives has been given. I think it is right time for all fellow Indians to stand up with us. Make Government of India understand what all wrongs have been done with Kashmiri Pandits.
Acknowledge all those wrongs.
Acknowledge all that and make sure that the right narrative goes all across the world. That Kashmiri Pandits have fled and this is a genocide. We accept this as genocide, and then we all live as fellow Indians, where we live in India, where we live in US, where we live in Kashmir. All of us live as Indians, and beyond that, we would like to live as Kashmiri Indians, wherever we want to live. I think that stage is very, very important for all of us.
Great. Thank you so much, Pandit Ji, for your time and for sharing all your experiences with us. And I look forward to more of our interactions and for more and to understand a little more regarding this issue. Thank you so much. So I look forward to seeing and meeting Pandit Ji again in our upcoming series. And we will try and understand a little bit more about the plight of the Kashmiri Hindus and what we can do as fellow Indians and as citizens of the world to help out the Kashmiri Pandits. Thank you so much for your time. Jai Hind.